Hello friends, and thank you for joining me here at Non-Toxic Home. As always, I'm glad you're here, and as always, I'm coming at you from our Non-Toxic Home. Today, in our continuation on how to research everything, which is, of course, a long series. See below for links to the previous topics that we've covered thus far. We are addressing the basic principles or basic tenets of science. This is very important because lots of people are walking around talking about what science tells us. Science says XYZ. Science tells us XYZ. Wow, that's amazing that science can talk to you. I have never heard science's voice before. That is pretty amazing. How fortunate are you to be able to communicate with a topic of research? That's amazing. That's amazing that you hear science's voice. Actually, maybe you need to go see a psychiatrist. All right, so there are some very basic tenets of science that you must consider if you are trying to examine chemicals or a pharmaceutical product or a building material or just about anything else that you can think of. Number one, there are always alternative viewpoints in science. Now today, as I've been declaring for years, we don't have science. In order for something to be considered scientific, these alternative viewpoints must be acknowledged and listened to. They have to have a voice. They have to be given a voice. Whether in the public sphere or in the peer-reviewed sphere, typically I would declare that these alternative viewpoints need to be acknowledged both publicly and in the realm of academia. Silencing opposition is not scientific. That is the antithesis of science. That's propaganda, likely corporate derived. Science without open and honest discourse is scientism. Scientism is a religion. Let's just call it what it is. It's a religion. Because you are putting all of your faith in one viewpoint of the world. That's where your faith is at. That means that it's a religion. And this is where we're at today. Most people today, unfortunately, adhere to the cult of scientism. They walk around saying, science says. Again, that's amazing that science can speak to you. How fortunate are you? In this crazy upside down world, many people with alternative viewpoints are silenced via various methods. This includes physicians, doctors, nurses, so those within the medical profession. This includes researchers. This includes politicians as well, actually. Not so often politicians. They generally don't go down that road. But if they do, then they're going to be attacked and potentially silenced. Now, how do these people get silenced? Well, professional pressure is very powerful. So most people don't realize how academia works, and that's a bit out of the scope of this video, but we have discussed it in other videos previously. There is pressure if you're funding as a researcher, whether you're a professor or just a scientist, not to make it sound like scientists are lowly at all. You understand what I'm saying here. So regardless of what your specific approaches and what you do with most of your time, there's got to be funding for most things. And generally speaking, that funding comes from a corporation or a company, typically a multinational corporation. And oftentimes it comes from nonprofits that are funded by that multinational corporation to do their bidding. All right, we're gonna call it what it is, to do their bidding. And many industries have been accused in judicial proceedings as operating like the mafia. That's where science comes from today. It comes from mafia-like multinational corporations, according to judges. I didn't make it up. I didn't make it what it is. I didn't make this world to operate like this. So don't blame me for speaking the truth. These alternative viewpoints, doctors are sometimes so-called disgraced. They'll have their license taken away if they speak too much truth. If they speak against, for example, the pharmaceutical industry too much, they will have their license taken away from them. And they won't be able to practice medicine anymore. And a lot of times they'll be referred to by mainstream sources as a disgraced doctor or a disgraced scientist. That which is highly esteemed by men is an abomination unto God. Just brought faith in. For those who are offended by that, then just pretend I didn't say that. But it is a fact. All right. So if you consider what is esteemed here in this world, it's generally not good. We're told that things that are toxic are good. That is the opposite of the truth. That is an abomination to me, at least. So it should be to you too. Another way that scientists, researchers are silenced is sometimes their families will be overtly threatened. Other times they will be threatened. Some doctors have bodyguards because they have had attempts on their life. They've been threatened. Some have had their cars bombed multiple times. I'm just stating facts. There are multiple websites online dedicated to researchers and doctors who have paid the ultimate price for speaking the truth about various topics. And typically this is in relationship to modern medicine, to Western medicine. And I didn't make this be the case. So if you are feeling mad or angry or upset with me, why? I didn't make this happen. I didn't cause that to happen. You should be upset with the people who are literally murdering people who want you to know the truth, rather than with someone who's just speaking the truth. As a result of my own research. So, number one basic tenet of science: there must be open and honest discourse. Otherwise, it is not science. Misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, BS. All right, I call BS on that. Secondly, science must be observable. You have to be able to see it happen. So if there's a theory that can't be watched, like you can't do an experiment to see it, that's not a scientific theory. Straight up. That's scientism. That's a religion. Okay? If it can't be observed, and it's never been observed, and it never will be observed because it can't be observed, then it's not scientific, and it should not be taught as fact. Even though this is what happens in our school system today, in our Rockefeller education system, this is what happens. All right, so when I was in college, I literally took all of the undergraduate and graduate courses that I could in evolution, because ever since I first learned about the theory of evolution when I was 14 years old, something didn't sit right. It didn't add up. It didn't make sense. And so I read, I was thirsty for knowledge. I wanted to understand because it didn't make sense to me. Like, there are so many things that don't make sense that disprove the theory scientifically from science, but it's taught as fact in the Rockefeller education system, and it didn't make sense to me. Now, if you have not already looked at the name of Charles Darwin's book, The Origin of Species, it's not just The Origin of Species. I can't recall the entire title, but go search in any search engine, Charles Darwin, Theory of Evolution, full name of book. There, I just gave you a search, and you'll find the full title of the book, and it talks about how racism is okay. It talks about how that's an all right thing because of evolution, and as such, it was used to promote slavery by the Englishers. I don't know, but it was used at that time, during Darwin's time, during his lifetime, to promote evil like that because somebody had a different skin color. And people talk about Darwin as like he was a good guy, but has anyone ever actually read the book besides me? Has anyone ever actually looked at the title besides me? Because I can't be the only person in the world who's actually read the book and looked at the title. Just like people talk about Freud all the time. And have you ever actually read any of Freud's books? Because he was a freaking insane dude. He was nuts. I was actually unable to check out the books from the psychology library at Purdue when I was there. But I read his books because I was interested. I wanted to know. Because he was talked about in my classes all the time. So I wanted to know. So I read a lot of his books. So I would sit there in the library reading his books, laughing my butt off and crying because it was so hilarious, the absurdity of the theories that he proposed and the things that he said. He's like a 10-year-old boy. All that boy could think about was sex. That was all. And yet today, oh, Freud, are you Freudian or are you Jungian? Which are you? And Jung's got had different issues. Freud was actually very concerned about Jung because Jung was heavily involved in the occult. And Freud was concerned that people would no longer take him seriously professionally because of his heavy involvement in the occult. So these are the two basic men when it comes to psychiatry. And look at them. You've got the same thing going on with Charles Darwin. But science must be observable. It absolutely must be observable. So I took all of the courses in evolution at a graduate level that Purdue offered. And I still... What? This doesn't make any sense. Why is this being taught as an actual valid theory? And so my final semester there, I went to E.J. Capaldi. He's one of my mentors there. He was in the School of Psychology. And of course, I took all of his courses. I did research under him, all these other things. And I just laid it all on the line. Because I got A's in all of those courses. I understood all of the tenets at a graduate level of the theory of evolution, all right? I wasn't an idiot here. I didn't have a 9th grade understanding of the theory of evolution. I had a very, very advanced understanding to the extent that I could write pages upon pages upon pages upon pages upon pages of essays in regards to this theory and get A's on it because it was what academia said was true. I laid it all on the line. I said, Dr. Capaldi, I don't get it. There are all of these problems inherent, and it keeps getting disproven by all these methods, by all these different things. It doesn't make any sense. Why is this being taught as a fact? Because I don't understand. And you know what he said eventually? Well, that's just what I believe. Bingo. Belief system. Scientism. That is scientism right there. The belief in the theory that the theory of evolution is true and fact-based and scientific is a religion. I can't be more clear about this. I don't need to prove this to you. Do your own research. There are plenty of websites out there offering an alternative voice in regards to this narrative. Research the theory of evolution yourself at a graduate level, and you will come to the same conclusion that I did, unless, of course, you're deceived by the God of this world. Okay, so I had to say it again. Sometimes I just got to bring in the faith because the theory of evolution is a faith. It is a religion. It is scientism. It is not actual science. It's been disproven repeatedly. Now, macroevolution and microevolution are not the same thing. Just because natural selection is valid and it's promoted as a mechanism or an engine of evolution doesn't mean that life from non-life actually happened. It doesn't mean that men and apes have a common ancestor. Unfortunately, a lot of the documentaries about evolution, I believe, are controlled opposition. because they set people up. A lot of them will say, well, humans didn't evolve from apes. Well, of course, the theory of evolution doesn't declare that humans evolved from apes. It declares that humans and apes developed and evolved from a common ancestor. That's a very different assertion than that humans evolved from apes. But a lot of these documentaries say, well, humans didn't evolve from apes. That's absurd. And yeah, that is absurd. And also, that's not what the theory of evolution teaches. So again, I believe this is controlled opposition in regards to that topic. Also, a lot of microbiologists who started out atheistic have changed and decided, wow, okay, there has to be intelligent design here. There's so much evidence and for intelligent design and so little evidence for the theory of evolution that it blows my mind that people are so deceived about this topic. So, alternative viewpoints are necessary. Number 1, in science. Number 2, science must be observable. If it can't be observable, then it's not a scientific theory. 3rd, it must be replicable. Any scientific study that cannot be replicated should be discarded. This has been an issue for at least 2 decades for certain. I had a professor, actually it was the same professor I was mentioning earlier, E.J. Capaldi, in one of his courses. It was an undergraduate course, I don't remember which one it was, but he taught about the replicability crisis, except he didn't teach about the replicability crisis. Every time that topic would need to be addressed in the course, he would go do something else during that hour and have his TA teach, because he was so upset about the replicability crisis, because he had that problem with his experiments, and his experiments were very well controlled, and I would consider his experiments to be valid science, at least the ones that I was involved in, and his early experiments in the 60s and 70s. So he had that problem where so many studies do have that problem where you have the same controls in a study, but you get different results. And these were studies that were conducted with rats. So there's a lot less variability with rats than with humans, quite frankly, in the result of research. And he was a learning psychologist, by the way. But the fact is that the replicability crisis is a huge issue in science. I would assert that at least 90% of the problem of the replicability crisis is not unknown for unknown causes. I would assert that it's because of junk science, basically. And a lot of studies don't disclose everything that I would consider personally to be necessary in order to replicate the study. I've reached out to some researchers, which, by the way, anytime you look at a study, you can reach out to any of those researchers and ask them questions about the study. And I urge you to do so, because that will help you understand where they're coming from, help you understand what they actually did. Some studies do disclose everything that's necessary, but most, in my opinion, don't disclose all of the controls that were necessary to conduct a study. So you have to be able to replicate a study. Otherwise, it's not science. Also, this should be very obvious, but because of the stupid, ridiculous world that we're living in, I gotta say it. Science isn't science if the data isn't actually there. If there's actually no data and it was made up, that's not science. Is that absurd or what? Some of the crazy pants things from Neil Ferguson, that's not science. That's not science. We've got some old articles, a few years old, up on our website about science. And for example, there was one gentleman who did 90 some studies, I want to say. It's been a few years, so I don't remember the precise number, but it's a lot of studies that he published. And it was in regards to studying cancer cancer. I don't remember if it was a cancer treatment, or it was probably a cancer treatment, but I don't remember for sure. But I know it had to do with cancer. And all of these studies he published about cancer, all right? And he, of course, got funding for it. What did he do with the money? I don't know. And he got to keep the money, by the way. He was exposed as a fraud, a fraudster, a huckster. He published all of this research on cancer, study upon study upon study upon study upon study upon study upon study that he got funding for through the U.S. government, through some kind of endowment through the U.S. government. I don't remember what, whether it was CDC or what. And all of his data was fraudulent. He made every single thing up. He made it all up. He didn't do any research at all. There was no study done. He made up the data. Okay, that's not science. Here's what happened to him. His funding was halted. He was told, no, bad boy. And he was told, you cannot get funding from this specific branch of the U.S. government for a year. And that was it. So he now is back at it because he can get funding now, because his funding was taken away for a year. He didn't do any research at all. Not one study did he do. He made up all of the data. And this is where science is today. Very little integrity. Those who do have integrity are often deceived about things. And they sometimes just aren't that smart. I gotta say it. I'm sorry. They just aren't that smart. They think that they're designing an experiment that is well controlled. Or they think that because they conducted a study, any study, period, that they're the bomb diggity. And they're just amazing because, I'm a scientist. Yeah. And the thing is that the studies that they did were junk. And this happens, unfortunately, a lot in non-industry funded research. Not just industry funded research. One of the most significant issues as a canary in the coal mine in this stupid toxic world is that a lot of times the popular studies that are alternative studies are junk science, and they're circulated by websites and blogs that are very popular in the alternative sphere as valid science, when they're crap. They're not worth the paper they're printed on. But there, for example, is an EMF study that I wrote an article on in, I don't know, I wrote it probably a couple years ago or so on our website if you want to go browse through all the EMF articles. But it makes the rounds every couple of years or so online in the alternative health sphere. And it basically proves that EMF hats help people. EMF shielding hats help people. But the study itself didn't have a control group. There's no placebo. That's just as bad as the crap industry science. It's ridiculous. Also, science must be open to peer review. That means that if you, for example, are studying non-native EMFs, then your study needs to be open to review and assessment and discourse, I would say, with other people who research in that field, regardless of whether they're mainstream or alternative researchers. One of the things that's very important I need to state in this video: some of the basic tenets of science have changed since I was a kid. That shouldn't be the case, but it is. This is huge. This is so huge because this is a basic tenet of science, but this is not what our children are being taught, at least not all the time. Science needs to be objective. That means how you feel about a topic doesn't matter. Your life experience shouldn't impact the results of the study. It doesn't matter. The data is what it is. Okay? Now, the opposite is true. According to multiple elementary school curricula online that I looked at. This is highly alarming. This is so alarming. This should have bells and whistles going off in your head all over the place. Science is now subjective, based on feelings and beliefs, not on actual observed data or observed events, not on facts. This is what children are being taught today. Science is about your feelings? Really? Well, consider 2020 and forward. People are spouting off still about science. Science says this is safe. Science says this is not safe. Science says this is healthy. Science says this is not healthy. Back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Okay, if that was actual science, that wouldn't be the case. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't alternative viewpoints, but the whole narrative about coffee good, coffee bad, coffee good, coffee bad, wine good, wine bad, wine good, wine bad. Every week, there's a different study saying a different thing. And so every time that happens, that's just intended to confuse you and keep you in a state of, what? I don't know anything. I'm an idiot. I have to do what the experts say because the experts would know. And the experts wouldn't say that this was healthy last week and say that it's not healthy this week unless they were, unless for any reason except for they know what science is and I don't. This world is ridiculous. So objective means that it's fact-based. It's not formed by your feelings. It's not formed by your beliefs. But at least some elementary school curricula and some junior high curricula in regards to science today are saying, no, science is subjective. It matters how you feel about it. What? Oh my goodness. Such insanity. Lastly, science also must be interpreted honestly. This is a huge issue. So, in a valid peer-reviewed study, the researcher should rip their study to shreds. I'm going to say this again in case you missed it. In a valid peer-reviewed study, the researcher should rip their study to shreds. This is so rare. So rare. And that was actually something that I thoroughly enjoyed doing in college. Just ripping studies to shreds. Like, that's not scientific. They didn't adhere to basic research methodology. That's not double-blind. They say it's double-blind, but that's not what double-blind means. That's not a placebo. Why didn't they use a placebo? Why didn't they have a control group? They should have had a control group. How can you say, that this is a valid conclusion without a control group? You can't take one pharmaceutical, compare it to another pharmaceutical, and declare your study to be valid. That's not a valid study. That's comparing two pharmaceuticals. That's not addressing the toxicity or effectiveness of of a drug. But this is science today. This is scientism. So this honest interpretation is absolutely essential. Confounds have to be disclosed. Anything that could cast doubt on the findings or the data or the statistical, I'm going to say it, manipulation, must be disclosed. Unfortunately, that's very rare these days. So we're going to review basic tenets of science. Open and honest discourse, otherwise you get scientism. Gotta be observable. Gotta be replicable. Must be actual data. You can't make up data. This is not Disney World. You gotta be open to peer review. It's gotta be objective, not subjective. Your beliefs are irrelevant. And there has to be honest interpretation. Fortunately, we live in a world in which honesty is not prized as much as it should be. I wouldn't say honesty is prized at all these days, especially if you watch just about any movie that's on the television. I hope this has been beneficial to you in discussing some of the basics of science, the basic tenets, the basic principles that must be adhered for anything to be considered scientific. We've got a whole lot of other topics to address in regards to how to research things, because there's just so much to know, and it's literally impossible for me to tell you everything that you will need to know, but I'm going to do my darndest to give you as much information as possible, God willing. So thank you so much for being here, and have a most beautiful and blessed day.